Imagine the silence of the night. A gentle breeze drifts through the air, and from the distant past, soft voices slowly begin to reach your ears. This story is told without haste, in a calm and steady voice. This story is meant to be listened to before sleep. This story is the history of a vast continent called America, a history that began in very ancient times. Ancient America, the earliest footsteps of humanity. The lands we now know as the United States of America lived a completely different life for thousands of years. Approximately 15,000 to 20,000 years ago, when much of the earth was covered in ice, a land bridge called Beringia connected Asia and North America. Because sea levels were lower, people slowly crossed this path into new lands. What were they searching for? A new life, food, safety. These people later became known as the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples of America. From the moment they arrived, they adapted to the land. They learned to hunt in forests, they fished in rivers, they survived in mountains and learned how to live in deserts. Tribes spread across the continent. Years passed. Centuries passed. The population grew and tribes began to form. In the north, in cold regions, lived the Inuit and Aleut peoples. In the central plains, warrior tribes such as the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Apache emerged. In the south, where the climate was warmer, agriculture flourished. Each tribe had its own language, its own traditions, its own legends and worldview. They believed nature was sacred, the earth was a mother, the sky was a father, animals were spiritual guides. America in those times was peaceful, natural, and calm. Ancient civilizations, Maya, Aztec, and Inca influences. Although large empires did not exist in what is now the United States, to the south, in Central and South America, great civilizations such as the Maya, Aztec, and Inca thrived. Their influence reached northward as well. There were trade routes, there was an exchange of knowledge. Astronomy, mathematics, and architecture flourished. These civilizations prove that America was not a wild continent, but a land rich in culture and deep history. Peace before the arrival of Europeans. For centuries, the continent lived at its own gentle rhythm. The sun rose in the morning, hunters went out to hunt, women lit fires, children played, and in the evenings stories were told beneath the stars. They knew nothing of Europe. They had never seen ships. For them, the world ended right here. But this peace did not last forever. The year 1492, the moment everything changed. The year 1492, ships sailing across the ocean. Christopher Columbus, a sailor from Europe, believed he had discovered new lands. In reality, these lands had already been inhabited for thousands of years. With the arrival of Europeans, diseases spread, tribes were destroyed, lands were taken. This marked the beginning of one of the most painful periods in American history. Here we gently bring the first chapter to a close. In the next chapter, the calm bedtime story will continue with the Spanish, the English, and the French, the rise of colonies, the beginning of slavery, told softly for peaceful sleep. The silence of the night grows even deeper. Waves gently touch the shore. A new era slowly begins. Europe's gaze upon America. By the late 15th century, great changes were taking place in Europe. Kingdoms were growing stronger, trade routes were expanding, and the desire for wealth and gold was powerful. To Europeans, America was imagined as an unknown, mysterious land filled with riches. First, the Spanish arrived from the south. Then the French came from the north. And finally, the English approached from the Atlantic coast. Each believed these lands belonged to them. The early Spanish dominance. Spain was the first to take serious steps into America. They settled in Florida, California, and southern regions. Their goals were clear: to find gold, to claim land, and to spread Christianity. Spanish missionaries attempted to forcibly convert the native population. Many indigenous people died from disease. Although this process may have seemed slow, it changed the future of the entire continent. The French mainly settled in Canada and along the Mississippi River. They maintained relatively gentler relations with native tribes. They traded. They exchanged furs. At times, they formed alliances. Yet the French also used these lands for their own interests. The beginning of English colonies. The year 1607. Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in America. This place endured hunger, disease, hard labor. Many settlers did not survive, but the English did not retreat. In 1620, the Mayflower arrived. Those aboard were pilgrims seeking religious freedom. They wished to create a new life, a new society, new rules. The 13 colonies. Over time, 13 English colonies appeared along the Atlantic coast. Each had its own character. In the north, trade and craftsmanship. In the middle, farming. In the south, plantations. Tobacco, cotton, and sugar began to be cultivated. But this wealth was built on slavery. The beginning of slavery. People forcibly taken from Africa, hands bound in chains, back-breaking labor. In 1619, the first enslaved Africans were brought to Virginia. Slavery became an economic system passed from generation to generation, deeply divided society. This is one of the darkest chapters in American history. The tragedy of indigenous peoples. As the colonies expanded, native lands were seized. People were forced to relocate. Treaties were broken. Tribes were destroyed. Their voices slowly faded away. New ideas in the colonies. By the 18th century, colonists no longer saw themselves merely as subjects of England, but as a distinct society. They were angry about taxes, demanding the right to vote, dreaming of freedom. These dreams slowly began to turn into revolution. End of the chapter. The night grows deeper, and history moves forward, slowly but with firm steps. In the next chapter, a calm bedtime story will continue with the War of Independence, George Washington, and the birth of America as a nation, told softly for peaceful sleep. Evening is slowly falling. A gentle wind blows. Footsteps from the distant past can be heard. America was standing on the edge of changing its destiny. Rising tensions with England. By the mid-18th century, the English colonies had grown stronger, both in population and in economic power. But England raised taxes, restricted trade, and ignored the voices of the colonies. This increased anger among the people. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," was born. The Boston Tea Party. The year 1773. Boston Harbor. The night was dark. A group of men boarded the ships. Crates of tea were thrown into the water. This event became known in history as the Boston Tea Party. It was not a simple protest. It was an open act of rebellion. The spread of the idea of independence. New ideas began to spread among the people. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense. In it, he declared, people should govern themselves. These words deeply influenced farmers, craftsmen, merchants. The beginning of the War of Independence. In 1775, armed conflict began. The Americans were weak, few weapons, an inexperienced army, severe financial hardship. But they were united by one powerful desire, freedom. George Washington steps onto the stage. George Washington was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the American forces. He was calm, patient, and deeply determined. Even during cold winter nights, he stayed beside his soldiers. The Declaration of Independence. July 4th, 1776. A document was read aloud. It contained the words, "All men are created equal." This document was the Declaration of Independence. With it, America broke away from England, chose its own path, and entered the stage of history. The end of the war. The war lasted for years. Many lives were lost. Many cities were destroyed. Finally, in 1783, England accepted defeat. America became an independent nation. The Constitution and a new system. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was written. It established the separation of powers, the presidency, the judicial system. This document remains in force to this day. The first president. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. He did not abuse power, refused to remain beyond 2 terms, laid the foundation of the nation. End of the chapter. The night grows even quieter. The new nation slowly begins to mature. In the next chapter, the calm bedtime story will continue with expansion. The Civil War. The abolition of slavery. Told softly for peaceful sleep. The night is deep. Voices are low, and history opens yet another heavy but important page. The journey westward. By the early 19th century, America began expanding from east to west. This movement was explained by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that it was America's fate to occupy the entire continent. People set out in wagons, traveled with families, dreams, and fears, moved toward the unknown in search of new land. The forced removal of indigenous peoples. What was hope for some became tragedy for others. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act was passed. As a result, thousands of native tribes were driven from their homelands. Many died along long, cold journeys. This path became known in history as the Trail of Tears. This chapter is read quietly, yet it weighs heavily on the heart. The divide between North and South America was developing along 2 very different paths. In the North, factories, trade, free labor. In the South, plantations, slavery, agriculture. This difference slowly turned into a deep conflict. Debates over slavery. As new territories opened, a question arose. Would these lands allow slavery or not? This question divided politics, society, families, and friends. Abraham Lincoln. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. He opposed slavery, wanted to preserve the Union, spoke in a calm, steady voice. But his election accelerated the path to war. The beginning of the Civil War. In 1861, the American Civil War began between the North and the South. This war set brother against brother, changed millions of lives, shook the nation to its core. Quiet tragedy during the war. On the battlefields, smoke, blood, exhaustion. But at night, silence ruled everywhere. The abolition of slavery. In 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. Slavery took a step toward its end. In 1865, the war ended. America survived, but it was wounded. The death of Lincoln. Not long after the war, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He did not live to see peace, but his words remained in history. End of the chapter. The night is silent. Hearts beat slowly. In the next chapter, a calm story will continue with industrialization, immigration, and America's rise to power. Told softly for peaceful sleep. The night is deep. Cities are slowly awakening, and America is entering a new era. Rebuilding after the war. After the Civil War ended, the nation slowly began to heal its wounds. The South lay in ruins. The North was busy with industry. Railroads were built. Factories began operating. Cities started to expand. The railroad, a symbol of a new age. By the late 19th century, thousands of kilometers of railroad tracks stretched across America. This accelerated trade, connected people, and linked the West with the East. America began to feel smaller. Waves of immigration. During these years, millions of people flowed into America from Europe. They fled hunger, escaped wars, came in search of a new life. Ellis Island became the gateway of hope. City life. New York, Chicago, Boston. Tall buildings rose. Streets grew crowded. Life moved faster. But work was harsh. Labor rights were limited. Poverty was widespread. Industrial magnates. During this era, wealthy figures emerged, such as Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan. They advanced industry, but wealth was not evenly shared. Labor movements. Workers began to raise their voices. Labor unions formed. Working hours were reduced. Child labor began to be restricted. America on the world stage. By the end of the 19th century, America was no longer only focused inward. With the Spanish-American War, Cuba, the Philippines came under American influence. The beginning of the 20th century. By the early 1900s, America was becoming powerful, industrialized, globally influential. But more trials lay ahead. End of the chapter. The night is calm. City lights slowly fade. In the next chapter, the quiet story will continue with World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, told softly for peaceful sleep. The night deepens once again. In the distance, it feels as if a train whistle can be heard. A new century brings its trials. On the eve of World War I, in the early 20th century, America was focused on its own internal development. Most Americans wanted to stay away from conflicts in Europe. Presidents would say, "This is not our war." For a long time, America remained neutral. Entering the war. In 1917, the situation changed. German submarines began sinking commercial ships. Secret telegrams were exposed. Public opinion shifted. America entered World War I. America in the war. American soldiers reached Europe. They brought fresh strength, reinforced the front lines, helped hasten the outcome of the war. In 1918, the war ended. America returned victorious, but thousands of families were left in mourning. The post-war years. In the early 1920s, America grew rapidly. This era became known for jazz music, cinema, and automobiles. People believed in the future. The beginning of the Great Depression. The year 1929. The stock market collapsed. Overnight, banks closed. Workers lost their jobs. Hope faded. This period became known as the Great Depression. Life of ordinary people. Lines on the streets. Silent crowds waiting outside soup kitchens. Families lost their homes, lost their savings, lost faith in the future. Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president. In a calm voice, he spoke to the nation through radio broadcasts. His policies were called the New Deal. The government created jobs, regulated banks, gave people hope. The shadow of World War II. By the late 1930s, danger once again loomed in the world. Hitler in Europe, Japan in Asia. America tried to remain neutral, but destiny had other plans. Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941. A peaceful morning. Suddenly, explosions. Japan attacked the Pearl Harbor base. This day was called a Day of Infamy. America entered World War II. America during the war years. Factories worked day and night. Women entered industrial jobs. The entire society was mobilized for war. At the front, fierce battles, long separations, Silent nights prevailed. The end of the war. In 1945, the war ended. Victory came, but the cost in lives was immense. America emerged as one of the most powerful nations in the world. End of the chapter. The night grows calm again. History seems to take a deep breath. In the next chapter, a slow and gentle story will continue with the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, the shaping of modern America. Told softly for peaceful sleep. The night grows even calmer. A radio voice seems to echo from afar. The world is no longer the same. A new world after the war. After the Second World War, the world was divided into two great powers. On one side, the United States of America. On the other, the Soviet Union. They did not fight each other directly, but a constant sense of fear remained. This period became known in history as the Cold War, an era of fear and suspicion. In America, people feared nuclear war, built bomb shelters, believed the enemy could be everywhere. Although these years appeared peaceful, they were filled with deep inner anxiety. The Korean and Vietnam Wars. Cold War conflicts unfolded in distant lands. In Korea, then in Vietnam. These wars lasted for many years, took the lives of young soldiers, divided society. The Vietnam War in particular left a deep mark on the American heart. The beginning of internal change. During the 1950s and 1960s, new questions arose within society. Why is everyone not equal? Why are some people without rights? These questions ignited the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. A calm voice. A call for peace. Martin Luther King Jr. would say, "I have a dream." He chose non-violent struggle. He demanded justice through peaceful means. Legal changes. In the 1960s, segregation laws were abolished. Voting rights were expanded. Society slowly began to change. These changes were not easy, but they were necessary. A cultural revolution. These years were filled with rock music, youth movements, ideas of freedom. America began to rediscover itself. The journey to the moon. The year 1969. The entire world watched an American set foot on the moon. This event was a triumph of technology, a symbol of the Cold War, a victory for humanity. The 1970s and 80s. Wars came to an end. Society grew calmer, but new challenges emerged: economic difficulties, political scandals, a loss of trust. The night has reached its deepest hour. Everything is quiet, and history slowly approaches the present day. The end of the Cold War. By the late 1980s, the world began to change once again. The Soviet Union weakened. Walls began to fall. In 1991, the Cold War officially ended. America became the sole superpower, took on global leadership, began to feel a new sense of responsibility. But with this power came new challenges. The beginning of the technological age. The 1990s. Computers, the internet, mobile communication. Tasks that once took weeks were now completed in seconds. America became a center of technology, gave rise to Silicon Valley, drew closer to the rest of the world. September 11th, the day peace was broken. September 11th, 2001. It was an ordinary morning. Then tragedy unfolded beneath the sky. The Twin Towers in New York collapsed. Thousands of lives were lost. This event shook the nation, redefined the meaning of security, led to new wars. America entered war once again, this time against terrorism. New wars and inner questions. Afghanistan, Iraq. These wars lasted for years, divided society, and raised painful questions. Americans once again began to ask themselves, where are we going? The first black president. The year 2008. Barack Obama was elected president. It was a historic moment. For many, it became a symbol of hope, a sign of change, a new chapter. Tensions within society. Modern America is highly diverse, extremely powerful, deeply complex. On one side, freedom; on the other, division. Race, politics, and economics put society to the test. The pandemic and a new era. The year 2020. It felt as though the world had come to a halt. The pandemic changed millions of lives, tested healthcare systems, forced people into isolation. America faced this trial as well. America today. Today, America is a powerful nation, a technological leader, yet still a society searching for itself. Its history is filled with pain, hope, struggle. A final quiet reflection. The history of America is not only about wars or presidents. It is the story of ordinary people, the story of dreams, the story of rising again and again. This history is not yet finished. The night slowly gives way to dawn. Breathing is calm, and the story comes to a gentle close.